I'm here with a 1995 Suzuki Escudo. This in other regions of the world was called a Grand Vitara. And these are extremely reliable cars. I mean, these are bulletproof. Anyone who owns one of these and takes care of them, this thing will last for ages. So this has a couple of problems. First one, which is the most annoying, is when you're driving and you clutch this thing in, it's a manual transmission, the engine tends to go off. So you have to clutch in and do a jump start when you let out the clutch so that the engine comes back to life. That is actually a timing issue. These have variable timing, not variable valve timing, but you can actually time the engine, and you're meant to change the timing on the distributor back here. A lot of people don't know how to time these, and if you time these wrong, you'll have different problems, and that's one of the symptoms. To time these, you're actually supposed to use a timing light. Timing light is obsolete technology. I don't have one. I'm not going to get one. I have a scope, so we're going to time that using a scope. Second problem this has is it doesn't get out of fast idle when the car warms up. Actually, the car doesn't warm up. That's the problem. It does not come up to temperature. But the reason for that is it does not have a thermostat. So the thermostat was taken out of this car because it was stuck shut, and then that problem came later. We're going to address that. Third one is it has a broken radio circuit. Put the key on. You can see radio is totally dead, doesn't work. I'm not sure if the accessory socket works. Then the fourth problem, and this one I realized when I was pulling in the car, this car has a misfire. The guy is shaking. It being a V6, you can't hear it or see it shake that much, but definitely feel it. And when you go to the exhaust, you hear that misfire. So a couple of good things we need to do to this car. I cannot address the timing of the engine with a misfire, so I need to do that first. But I can't address the misfire with the thermostat not being done, because this thing will not heat up. The temperature barely comes up from C. It just touches that end mark there, and then it stays there. This engine needs to be able to come up to temperature for me to do the timing, and it needs not to be misfiring. So the first order of business is, since it's cold, we're going to take care of the thermostat. Second order of business, we're going to take care of the misfire. Third order of business, we're going to take care of the timing. And then the fourth order of business, we're going to look at that radio circuit and see why the radio doesn't come on. When we do that, this car will have some more life in it and should go back on the road. So let's begin with the thermostat. For the thermostat on these cars, we need to remove the radiator and then access the thermostat at the lower radiator hose. And that's basically it. You change the thermostat, you change the gasket, you bleed the cooling system, and this is done. Now, I'm not going to show this process. This channel is not really meant to be a step-by-step channel for repairs. There are already too many YouTube channels that have that. That's not my goal. The goal of this channel is to show you interesting case studies and diagnosis, and occasionally bad repairs that you'd find in my country. I'm in Kenya, and we tend to find very funky repairs done on cars. That I will show, but as far as step-by-step repairs, that's not the goal of this channel. Sorry if that disappoints some of you. Occasionally, if I'm doing a repair and I find something interesting, then I will do a video on that, but I will just put the camera on when the thermostat housing is open, maybe talk about a few things to watch out for, then button this thing back up. Just a quick update. You can actually get by doing this without removing the radiator. What you need to do is to unbolt the lower radiator hose. By the way, this is the lower radiator hose entry. It's a dual entry. There's a lower entry there where the thermostat goes in, then there's the upper entry here. Make sure you get the gasket for the upper entry, because the thermostat gasket will only come, and that will be the lower entry. So you'll need to get your thermostat, which will come with a gasket for the lower entry, and you need to get the gasket for the upper entry. And for God's sakes, don't put any sealant here. And there's our thermostat and new upper radiator hose gasket. Let's proceed. 10 Newton meters. All right, let's fill up. And as we are bleeding the system, I'm going to try and find a strategy to find our misfire. I found a strategy for my misfire here in the wiring diagram. Let's quickly check out these coils. These are the 6 coils for the V6 system, and they are connected to an external igniter, and the igniter is connected to the control module, which means I can view my coil primary for each of these coils. That's wonderful. So I'm just going to go one by one down the line here. Coil number 1, brown. Coil number 2, brown and black. Coil number 3, brown and white. Coil number 4, brown and yellow. Coil number 5, brown and red. Coil number 6, black and brown. Those are my control wires coming from my igniter. So I'm just going to, on one channel, not going to bother hooking up more than one channel for now, I'm going to probe this control wire, then go to this one, down the line. And hopefully we'll see something on our waveform, something that stands out to us. If not, we'll choose another strategy. So the igniter is really easy to get to. Right here on the firewall, next to my battery, there's my igniter, and it's conveniently labeled. This is the control module side, this is the coil side. So I'm going to start from the top, which is coil number 1, going down the line. So the engine is running. I had to let the engine run for a while because the belt was really screaming. Couldn't hear myself think over it, and the reason is because when I did the thermostat, coolant poured out of there and went on the belt. It's still chopping away back there, but it's now manageable, so we can continue. Okay, I'll focus you on the igniter here. Oh, and this engine is really shaking now, as you can see. So on our igniter, we're going to go down the line, starting from number 1, and we're going to look at our waveform pattern. And we'll also do a snap throttle. You'll always want to do a snap throttle because you want to see whether that spark is occurring in the cylinder. A lot of times I've had very good pattern, but when I do a snap, you don't see any turbulence. If you don't see any turbulence, there's nothing doing in there. And make sure your sample rate is high enough. Mine is kind of overkill. I'm at 20 nanoseconds, but better too much than too little. We're going to start with channel 1 there. That looks like a very good pattern. Okay, let's do a snap. If I can reach my throttle cable. Here it is. I'm going to do a snap. That looks good. There's turbulence over there, definitely occurring inside the combustion chamber. Let's go to number 2. And there's number 2. Oh, folks, we found our problem. So that is a pretty neat capture right there. Now that shows either we have a shorted plug or a shorted coil secondary, one of the two. We're going to eliminate. We don't even need to do a snap throttle on that one. Let's go down the line. Let's go in here to number 3. And I'm in there. And I have nothing on the screen. So this is a lesson. Just because you found one problem, it doesn't mean you don't check all of them. Check everything. We're in number 3, and right now we don't have any activity on 3. How do I know there's no activity? Well, first, I'm not seeing any motion here, but we can actually check by putting the trigger on none, and then we can actually see some activity there. So let me pause this. And we're going to go back. You see this? This is some kind of control, but there is no activity response on 3. We are going to check the control on the other side of the igniter, but keep this in mind. 2 has either a shorted plug or shorted coil. 3 doesn't have any activity. So this is a dual cylinder misfire right now, at least. Okay, let's go back to triggering on repeat, and on repeat you can see we have nothing. Let's move on, and let's go to channel 4. 1, 2. I keep saying channel, ignore that, it's coil. Coil number 4 is there. I'm not in there, just a minute. That is coil number 4. I don't seem to have any activity on 4 either. Oh, my scope is stopped. So there's number 4. Oh, since we were paused, I just want to repeat 3. Let me put this back on none, and we just come here and go back to number 3. I just want to make sure. All right, I'm in the. Oh, we do have something on 3. Is that 3 or 4? Oh, we're still on 4. My bad. We'll go to 3 up here. There, I'm in the wire. I can feel it. And yes, we have nothing in there. And we can now put our trigger on repeat, and that shows that we have nothing. So 3 bad. So let's go to number 4. Number 4 looks good, and I'm just going to give it a snap. Oh, wait a minute, check that out. Okay, I'm going to pause this. Now my pico sometimes has a problem pausing. Okay, let me do this again, and I'll pause it very quickly. Pause it, and I want to go back, and I want to see that snap. Guys, look at this. There's something wrong with number 4, and I bet you this is the plug, or again the coil. Something is wrong here. Let me unpause this. This is a lesson again. Remember, I told you always check on a snap. Right now that kind of looks good, but on a snap we have issues, multiple issues on this car. Ignition system is messed up. Let's go to the next one, and This one is number 5. That's number 5. Number 5 looks good again, but are we completely good? Let's snap and watch it. Alright, I like that. Number 5 is good. Oh, my coolant is beginning to boil. Let me take care of my coolant real quick. It's beginning to boil and I'll come back to this. I'm just waiting for the coolant to go down. I've put off the engine. And this car, remember I told you the temperature could never go above that C line on the mark. Let's look where it is. And this is a lesson on big engines. This is a V6. Large engines need thermostats. Look at that. Now our temperature is up. This temperature the needle would forever be at that, just on the mark there above C. And that's no good. Now we are at operating temperature, and that's why our idle has actually come down. So all that fast idle nonsense was simply because of a thermostat. Imagine that. And most people will chase a control module problem or a controller problem. That was not the case. Okay. Seeing in the front there, my coolant is not boiling anymore. Let me get rid of that, put the cap on, and we'll continue our tests. Done with that. Let's start the car and continue. Okay, so we were on number 5, and number 5 was good on a snap and good at idle. And let's go to our last coil there, which is number 6. And that's number 6. Again, looks good. Give it a snap here. I like that. That looks good. Okay. Let me shut down the car and then we see how to proceed from here. Alright, let's see what we have. Cylinder number 1 has got good ignition. Cylinder number 2 has either a shorted plug or a shorted coil. Cylinder number 3 has got no control. That's the one that's really on my mind right now. Cylinder number 4 is bad on a snap, but it's good at idle. Cylinder number 5 is good, and cylinder number 6 is good. Now we need to ID our cylinders here, because we have 3 on this side and we have 3 on the driver's side. Now remember, we're in Kenya. This is drivers, this is passengers. In US, this would be passenger, this would be driver. It doesn't matter. Let's go to the service manual and see our cylinder IDs. So these are our cylinder IDs. It says throughout this manual, the 6 cylinders of the engine are identified by numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as counted from the crankshaft pulley side to the flywheel side. This is our crankshaft pulley side, which is the front of the engine, and how we label 1, 3, 5 on the passenger side, 2, 4, 6 on the driver's side. So coming to our engine, to give us our perspective, this is the left, this is the passenger side, this is 1, 3, 5, and this is right, driver's side, 2, 4, and 6. So we have a problem on 2, and we have a problem on 3, and we have a problem on 4. So we have a problem on 2, 3, and 4. These seem to be separate problems. First, I want to identify to me what seems to be the major problem, and that is number 3, which is this one here in the middle, has no control. So we either have a bad igniter or we don't have power to our coil. Actually, no, scratch that. We do have power to our coil. Do you know why? Because that 12 volts was appearing here. Aha! You see why you need a scope? That 12 volts is appearing on this side. So I want to check whether we have control on this side and this side is not responding, or we do not have control on this side at all. So let me take my probe and we're going to probe number 3. That's in there, and I felt that I'm in that wire. It's just the way it feels when you probe it. And we're going to take a second channel and probe number 3 on this side. So this is the control side. I want to see if we have computer control. And I suspect we do have computer control because I could see some kind of almost control-ish on this side, but I don't want to assume. Let me probe this side. I want to see what my control looks like. That channel A is on number 3. This channel B is on number 3 control. So computer control comes in. The transistor inside the igniter is supposed to turn the coil on. Let's look at the scope. Here's the scope, and what do we see? We do have control from the ECU. Let me just pause this. And this looks kind of weird. I know that this shouldn't look like this. Okay? And then down here we look like we are trying to control the coil, but we are not going all the way to ground. Let me zoom in and I'll show you something here. Now if you watch this, we are moving from 14 volts, but we are only going down to 11 volts. Why is this happening? And then this is kind of flat at the top. I know this is not supposed to look like this. In fact, what I can do is start this scope again. So now we're live, and I'm going to come here and we're going to move from number 3 to number 1, which we know is working. That's number 1, and look at that. That's what we have on number 1. Look at this nice chiseled profile. But of course, we won't have anything down here because we are not on number 1. But we can move it to number 1. It doesn't take long. Just remove that, and there we go. On number 1, and back to our scope. You can pause that. And so you see, when our transistor turns on, we go fully to ground. So this drops way down, and we are dropping down to about 900 millivolts. Okay, so we drop down, and then when the transistor shuts off, that's when we get our spark begins, and then our spark duration is what you see here. And then when you see this kind of go up and oscillate, it means this coil had more energy than is required. So this spark is very strong. If you see no oscillation here, it's a sign that your spark is quenching before all the burn has happened in the cylinder, which points to a weak coil. So this is good, but we do not have this kind of control on number 3. So we could either have a bad igniter, so either our igniter here is bad or our coil is shorted, and what's happening here is when it tries to take the coil to ground, we have a large energy jump, and the igniter sees that and says, oh, wait a minute, and it stops that activity from proceeding further as a limiting effect. How do we tell which is which? It's very simple. I want to put a current clamp on my number 3 here, and I see what kind of current is being consumed by that coil when the igniter commands it on. And then I will know whether we have a bad igniter or whether we have a shorted coil. Alright, our next capture. We have added a current clamp on that line. We still have our control line to the coil, and we're still taking on the other side the control to the igniter. And check this out. This line is drawing way too much amperage. So even when we go down this much, and remember it's not much, let's just measure it again. Just by daring to turn on this coil by dropping that voltage from 14 to 11, we are pulling an insane amount of amps. We are pulling 7 amps. 7 amps just with a voltage difference. Let me measure this again. This is really awesome. And that shows that that igniter has a very nice built-in protection circuit. Just with a voltage difference of 2 volts, we are pulling 7 amps. This igniter is protecting itself. So, one of 2 things is wrong here. We either have a shorted coil number 3, or we have a short on the line that controls number 3. How do we differentiate the 2? Very simple. We'll come to the coil, unplug it while our scope is running, and then see if our current draw goes away. If our current draw goes away, we are done. We have a shorted coil. If our current draw still remains, then this line to this coil is shorted. Let me set up for that. That is coil number 3. So I'm just going to unplug it while the scope is running, and we're going to watch our current. So let me just come here, and I'll just very carefully unplug, and our current draw has gone away. We are done. This is a shorted coil. So we're going to mark this with a big old X, and then let's address the other 2 suspected lines. Our next suspicious cylinder is cylinder number 2. It's on the driver's side, and that is this one. So on cylinder number 2, we either have a shorted secondary on the coil, or we have a shorted plug. Now, how do we differentiate the 2? What we're going to do is take number 2 out, and we are going to move it to number 1, which is on this side, because we know number 1 is good. So first I'm going to take my marker. So with our marker, we'll just mark this number 1, and we're going to come here and mark this one number 2. Oh, by the way, sorry, that's not number 2. That is number 2 right here. Okay. My brain is fried. Okay, we're going to mark this number 2 here. There we go. And now what we're going to do is to take that number 2 and swap it with the number 1, and then we're going to take our capture again. So we're going to leave the line on number 1 because we know number 1 is good. Swap the 2, see what happens. If our funky pattern moves to number 1, then it means that number 2 has a shorted secondary. Alright, so we've moved our number 2 to the number 1 spot, and we have moved our number 1 to the number 2 spot. And we are on number 1 here. And check out our scope. We have a good pattern on our scope. So what that means is the problem has not moved with the coil. The problem is the plug wire, which is on the other side. And we can verify that. Let's just move from that number 1 and we go to the number 2 here, and remember the coil is switched already, and there we go, we have our shorted pattern. So we are done with that side. We have a shorted plug on number 2. Moving on to our final one, and that is the number 4. Number 4 is here next to number 2, right there. That one was only bad on a snap. So again, we could either have a bad secondary that cannot keep up with the snap, or we have another bad plug on number 4. First, we're going to mark it. All right, so that's a number 4. And then how are you going to differentiate? You guessed it, we're going to switch number 4 coil with number 2 coil, and we'll keep our probe on number 4. Remember, this was only bad on a snap. We know that this coil is good. Why? When we moved it across to the number 1 spot and we took our capture, the igniter, we had a good capture. So if we swap 2 and 4, start the car, snap it. If our snap goes funky, then it's the plug. If our snap remains good, then we know that this coil is going out. So there we go, we've moved number 4 to number 2 and number 2 to number 4, and right at the igniter we are still taking number 4 this time. So we're in number 4, and let's look at our capture, and this is not good enough. Remember, our problem was on a snap. So let's go to our throttle cable. So now let's go to the snap, take our throttle cable, snap and watch it. Again. And what do you see? The funky event on a snap remained on number 4. So what does that tell you? Number 4 plug is bad. So what do we have here? We have a shorted plug on 2. We have a shorted coil on 3, and we have a shorted plug on 4. Now, I'm not a betting man, but if I were a betting man, I would bet my entire house on this. Somebody put substandard plugs in this car, and those plugs have shorted that coil, and they are about to short these two coils. This is the only explanation I have. So what do you tell the client in this case? First of all, this is a lesson. Test everything. This felt like a single cylinder misfire, but we have seen it is a multi-cylinder misfire. If we stopped at the coils, we would have put a coil in this car and we would have missed the fact that these plugs are bad. The proper fix for this is this owner needs a new ignition coil. Then we need to change these entire plugs with OEM brand new. No exceptions. This is a lesson. This is what happens in my country. For those of you out there who are fond of buying plugs from petrol stations or from vendors just out there, you buy cheap plugs, this is what can happen to your vehicle. So you will fry an expensive coil just because you're putting in cheap plugs. And this would have been worse too. If you would have continued driving like this, I am so sure number 2 and number 4 coil would have also gone. So that's it for now. We can't do the ignition timing because we need an engine that doesn't misfire. Let me contact the owner. I need a new set of plugs and I need a new coil, and then we will do our test from there. Again, I will not trust that the plugs we're given are good. I want to test with my own eyes. I want to see we're good on idle and we're good on a snap. Once I'm satisfied, then we will proceed to do the ignition timing for this car. So I spoke to the owner of the car, and unfortunately the local Suzuki dealer has gone bust and no OEM plugs available for this car. He had bought from an aftermarket dealership, and I suspect that is where we're having a problem. So what I did is I told him we're going to buy a Toyota replacement plugs because I want OEM plugs. I don't want any more issues with this car. So let me show you the replacements that I got, and let me show you the process. So the first thing is we come to the Denso spark plug cross-reference site, and that's from denso.com right here. And we're going to search under Suzuki. We search for the OEM number. This is the OEM spark plug number for this car, 09482000429. So we come here and narrow, and we can see that this is K20 PRU. Now you see here that Denso put a replacement for iridium power and iridium tough. Now I'm going to pay attention to this and this, but first, K20 PRU, we need to find if there is a Toyota part that matches or comes close to this. So we're going to come to the Denso Toyota cross-reference. So here let's search for K20 P. We don't have P. Let's just go to R U, and we do have K20RU here. Now is it the only one? So we have several of them. So what I did was to pick K20RU, but here we have only RU11. So we're going to take this spark plug part number, and we're going to narrow it down up here. So when we narrow it down, we have these two part numbers, 90919-01184, 90919-01184-BN. I can get this from the local Toyota dealer. And if you notice, iridium power is the replacement, IK20, and that is exactly the same as this one, and VK20 iridium tough is exactly the same over here. The other thing to check, if you did not have the Denso sight, once you think you get a cross reference, you need to check two things: the heat range and the plug gap. But once you see that Denso has cross-referenced the same plug and the iridium power and the iridium tough, you know that these two are going to be the same spec. They're going to be able to handle the same spec. So we're going to come very quickly and check our plug. This is the Suzuki OEM plug. Just make sure that our teeth here are correct, and then we come to the Toyota part number, and when I count it here, they are also correct. So once I saw that, I placed an order with the Toyota dealer and they were delivered. So these are our plugs. 90919 01184, genuine Toyota, and that is what we have. Now for the coil, we could not get an OEM new coil, so he got a used coil. I am not a fan of used products, but it's better a used OEM coil than an aftermarket new coil. So we're going to put this in and try it. He did get warranty for it. If it doesn't work, he can return it. So let's see how this will work. Coils are in, set up for the ignition primary waveform. Scope is running, and let's do it. Beautiful. Car is running very well. No misfires. Let's just verify the exhaust. Here's the exhaust. It is smoking. No misfire though. Pretty damn smooth. Let's go back and take our waveform. Alright, back at the igniter. We're going to take our waveform starting from cylinder number 1. Right now we're in number 1. Remember, you need to snap it. Let's do a snap. Very good. Go down the line. And this is number 2. That's number 2. Looking good. Snap it. Very nice turbulence, very nice waveform. I'm happy with that. Go to number 3. There's number 3, looking good. Let's snap it. Excellent. Very responsive. On to number 4. That is on number 4, looking good again. One snap. Beautiful. 2 more. Go to number 5. That is number 5, looking excellent. Little snap. And lastly, number 6. That is number 6, looking good. One last snap here. And we are done. Misfire is gone. Engine is happy. Running very well. Done with the misfire.